Hello, folks. Beautiful day in Queensland today. Typical winter now, blue sky. A bit chilly in the morning. But without further ado, for the people who wanted to know, that's the city of Brisbane skyline. Without further ado, this guest today has done an amazing job to get up so early in the morning. It's now coming up for 2 o'clock in the morning. She's on the west coast of the United States. It's been awesome. She knows her soccer, football. So she follows Spain. So we're going to be sponsoring and supporting Spain in its clash against the Argentinian team. So in the World Cup. So without further ado, we go straight to the top, to the Northern Hemisphere, none other than Priti Pauline. And it's a good evening to you, and it's a good morning to you.
Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good night, all of it. A very gracious greeting to everyone from all of us. And it's a great delight for me to introduce you to Cindy Urrutia. And she is, yes, in California. And her and I have a connection through the Akashic Records group that both of us delve into every now and again. Cindy has written a number of books, and more recently it's one called The Wholeness Reset, that captivated me, and what motivated me to reach out to Cindy through the group and say, "Hi, why don't you want to come and talk about it and tell us a little bit more about yourself?" She has a fantastic story to tell us about loads of aspects of her life. So welcome, and thank you very much for being with us, especially at this time of the day.
Thank you. I'm honored that you invited me. I'm very excited to be here, and let's do this. Let's have an amazing conversation where we're all opening our hearts and making magic and dreaming happen today.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I'd like to start off with is the dedication of your book, which really opened me up. It says, the Wholeness book is dedicated to all those who have temporarily lost sight of their wholeness. Inner truth and power. May this book help you to remember what is within you. An illuminated soul filled with light, sacredness, and grace. And I think to myself, isn't that a beautiful way of looking at whoever you encounter in the world, that they are illuminated? So that enriched my life. The words themselves just opened my heart to looking at people from that perspective. So there must be a huge story that brought you to that point, because as I read through it, I could see an awful lot of, if you like, personal development world adjectives: becoming, remembering. So tell us some more, please.
Well, thank you. I wrote this book with this burning desire within me to help us all remember that we truly are luminous. And, to be transparent, I have forgotten my own luminosity many, many times. So on the one hand, the dedication is for everyone who has walked that path, may potentially walk that path, or is ready to return. And here's the thing. There's not one return. There's many returns. There's multiple returns. So, I'm now in my 5th decade. We don't always like to talk about age as women, but I'm now in my 5th decade. And I can tell you, going through the different seasons of the soul, the different seasons of our lives, there's been times where I have felt empowered, like I'm on top of the world. I'm in a flow state. Everything's happening. And there's times where I haven't, where I have forgotten my own power, my own divinity. And some of it has just been me forgetting. Some of it has been life lessons. So much of it has been inspired by my own experiences, as well as what I've seen around me, what I've seen, people going through. Ever since I was a child, I was extremely observant. I would always pay attention to people, their patterns, why they were acting a certain way, what their feelings were. So I've always had this curiosity for understanding. But within this curiosity, there's also a compassion for, oh, we all make mistakes. Oh, we all sometimes forget. And sometimes we're our harshest critic. And when
Yeah.
we're our harshest critic, that's when it's hard to remember that we are a luminous soul. And there's something that I want to share that actually I had thought about it, but I had not given words to it until I wrote the book. Is this idea that you cannot hide from your light once you understand and see your light. And this isn't an original idea. It's actually something I built upon. I know many people are familiar with Marianne Williamson's A Return to
Yes,
Love.
yes.
And she has that famous quote where our biggest fear isn't that we're inadequate, but that we're luminous, right? So she talks about this idea that we're scared of our own luminosity. And and that's on the more spiritual side. On the more psychology, sociology, personal development side, Brene Brown talks about how we feel shame. And because of shame, we hide. So these are, and that's a fear. We have a fear of not being loved or embraced. So there are two people speaking about something very similar, but from a slightly oblique angle to one another, but they basically weave in and out. And as I sat with some of these ideas and also my experiences, I said, but wait a minute, I think we can give it a little bit more nuance, because it's not just about being scared of our own light. It's not just about the shame that we all sometimes experience or feel, but once you see and understand your light, you can't hide it. You cannot hide from your light. You can hide behind shame. You can hide behind fear. You can hide behind pain and all these other layers upon layers, but you cannot hide from your light. And that's why when we understand that, we understand our own luminosity. But we all forget. Like I said, I have forgotten many of times, and perhaps you have too. So the whole idea of the reset, of a wholeness reset, is that sometimes we need to remember, reset. Just like you sometimes, have to, reset, the barometer. You have to reset, like when you change the oil and your mileage gets reset. We all sometimes need a little bit of a reset. And sometimes within the reset is taking a step back and saying, oh, yeah, I forgot. Because here's the thing, no matter how evolved you are, no matter how expanded your consciousness is, no matter how much personal development work you do, nobody is immune to life happening. And nobody is immune to sometimes being humbled a little bit. And when that happens, we can stay in this place of sorrow, of grief, and we layer false identities upon one another. But when we stop and say, oh, wait a minute, I'm doing that again, rewind, reset. And that's the basis for the wholeness reset, what led me to write it. Of course, there's a lot more in the book. It's a lot more complex than that. I talk about different themes, but that's really the why of it. And it does start off with, some very some more traditional personal development language, and then it starts
Yeah.
to sneak in the soul. The more chapters you read, the
Yes,
soul
yes, yes.
starts. And the reason for that is because I think that sometimes people are more comfortable with certain language before they're ready to see that it really boils down to the soul. Even when we talk
Yeah.
about it, we're not always that comfortable. So I weave it in. So it starts a bit, some of the
Yeah.
traditional lingo, and then you read
Mhm.
more and it's like, where is this going? Well, you have to
Yeah,
read the
yeah, yeah.
book to find out.
Yes, yes. And I have to say that I can acknowledge that when I look at, even just right at the very beginning, the adaptation, the idea that adaptability is intelligence. Whereas, you've pulled out a couple of shall we say, archetypes, modern day archetypes, the achiever, the pleaser, the caretaker, the rebel, the expert, and the invisible one. And all of those are easily for people to identify themselves. And within both of them, you put if you like, the shadow side and the light side, and they're all together in a couple of sentences, and it just brings focus for somebody who acts in a particular way or predominantly acts, that they can identify with it. So everybody's in there without having to go into massive detail, and it's contained within 1 or 2 pages. And I can see definitely as you go through the book that there's an awful lot more. And I love the way that you've brought the soul perspective into the book. So as I've had a good delve into it, let's talk a little bit about the soul's perspective in all of this and how you've uh, narrated it for the rest of the world.
Thank you. So my belief is that the soul's drive is to grow, to expand, to learn. We all want to be learning and expanding. That is
Mhm,
the drive of the soul. But within this drive of the soul, we're in relationship, we're in
mhm,
consciousness. So within that, we also have to learn how to navigate this world. So when you talk about the idea of adaptability, adaptability is neutral, but it has a shadow and it has a light. So if you adapt out of fear to people please, to fit in, that adaptability hurts you and you start to layer false identities. That's when you become the people pleaser. And what you're doing is you're shielding your light because you're not shining it. What you're doing is you're adapting yourself to fit in to a circumstance or
mhm,
person
mhm, mhm,
based on what you think will give you some sort of approval, validation, or connection. So that's
mhm,
one
mhm,
form of adaptation. Another form of adaptation is adaptation for connection, meaning, okay, well, you know what? We're doing a podcast here together. And so, in one way or another, I need to adapt to this environment. So,
mm,
and I'm making this very simple, right? This is a very simple type of metaphor, but I'm coming in to your space with the intention of us having a conversation, with the intention that I'm going to respect your space because you have been kind and generous to invite me. So there's some adaptability going on, right? I'm here
mm,
adapting to this space, which is different than when I'm in a different space. But my goal, my intention is to create connection, not
mm,
to be pleasing to be accepted by you, which is something I could
mhm,
do, right? I could give you whatever answer you might want. I might could say whatever words might sound right or pretty, but that's a little bit one dimensional.
superficial.
And there's nothing wrong with that if you haven't learned yet that, you're people pleasing and there's more. And the reason I'm saying there's nothing wrong, because sometimes you don't know. You don't know what you don't know. But once you start to know, there's an alternative. So then you could say, no, I am here adapting to your space to create connection. And if my intention is connection, your intention is connection, then that's what we're
Yes.
going to transmit to the people who are here tuning into us. They're going to connect with us. They're like, I say, yes, I feel the connection. I feel the open-heartedness. I feel the sincerity. And connection is coming from sincerity, and adaptability that comes from sincerity is for connection. But adaptability from fear, from ego, from just trying to fit in and somehow be okay or validated, then that's the shadow. What is navigating here, what's showing you what things are, is the soul. The soul, that thing that sometimes in your gut, makes things flutter, where you're nervous and you're like, okay, did I say the wrong thing? Be small, don't say much. Or, oh yeah, we just connected. And then all of a sudden your heart opens. And in that opening, it's your consciousness and your soul, because the connection is there, the sincerity. And yet we're still adapting to one another because we're getting to know one another. So adaptability is neutral. And many of the things that I do address in the book is tools. Most tools are neutral. It's the intentionality behind which we do that. And the intentionality is usually driven by the soul, that part of you, that essence within you, where you feel grounded and at ease with yourself, because you are basically interacting and showing up to this world from that place of sincerity.
Wow. Okay, we had some conversations before we started the show today. And one of the interesting things about you was how you described your PhD and the visual nature of art, and that perhaps an awful lot of what's going on in the world now, the seeds for it were sown about 150 years or so ago. So I'm kind of wondering now, and it was a delightful, enlightening, visual conversation that we were having. And I'm kind of wondering, what kind of seeds do you think are being sown now for the next 150 years? Or shall we go back 150 years just to solidify the concept that you're talking about? That would be nice.
Okay, so there's this idea, there's this German word that I believe many people are familiar with, zeitgeist. So
Zeitgeist. Yes, zeitgeist. Yeah.
So you say, oh, it's the zeitgeist. And what is
Mhm.
zeitgeist? Zeitgeist is the spirit of the time. The spirit of the time.
Yeah.
What ends up happening is we don't always recognize the spirit of the time until there's been a little bit of distance. So let's not go 150 years. Let's just go back, for example, to something most people, at least within our generation, can relate
go back 50
to.
years when we won the World Cup.
For example, when you think about the 60s, what's the zeitgeist of the 60s, right? You think about love, you think about revolution, you think about civil rights. There's this spirit. And that spirit, that zeitgeist of the times, it's about this expanding consciousness that came about from humanity saying, well, we could do things a little bit better. But at the same time, if you were living in that time, there was an element of society saying, well, that's rebellious, that's going against the norm, that's terrible, that's wrong. Because remember, there was also a lot of civil unrest. So the civil unrest that came from civil rights movements that we saw all over the world, well, for some, that was something very bad. For others, it was this expanded consciousness of how can we have respect for the other? How can we bring more love?
Yeah.
So then when we think about the 60s nowadays, we think, oh, the flower child, the free spirit. It has a very different connotation than it did back there, because back then there was a lot of
Mm,
conflict and controversy. But when we look back now, we're like, yeah, there was a lot of controversy. But
mm,
look at all of the expanded consciousness, the laws that were passed in various countries throughout the world as a result of what was happening. And you saw it expressed in literature, you saw it in the music, you saw it in the films, in the art. So you can think about some of those things. And that's, I think, a very perhaps relatable example. Now, if we go, let's say we go further back a little bit so we can
okay.
understand, some of
Mhm,
the zeitgeist of the time. So let's go to,
mm,
um, let's say the the 20s, the teens and the 20s. There was something interesting happening
yeah,
in different parts of the world at that time called
mm,
cultural nationalism that was being created. So, for example, the textbook example is Mexico, because Mexico had a 10-year revolution, right? From like 1910 to like about 1920. So before that, it was very what is called quote unquote Eurocentric. But during the revolution, there was this move towards indigenous pride, indigenous things, and trying to understand, well, what is our culture? What is our identity? And the complete identity changed. But it was an identity that actually came from the intelligentsia, from the top down. And you saw it reflected in the literature. For example, there's this very famous book called the Cosmic Race, which was written by the Minister of Education, Jose Vasconcelos. And it was about this cosmic race, which is supposed to be all these races coming together to create this master race. So it was very altruistic, but it's a very interesting book that came as a
mm,
result of that, ahead
mm,
of its time. In the
mhm,
United States, you're also having this idea of cultural nationalism rising, where the folk art and what is Americana, right? Because we were, quote unquote, looked at as backwards compared to Europe in terms of like cultural heritage, because we're a younger nation here. But when you look at the same time period, there's also a very similar rise happening during that time period. You see that happening also in Brazil. That also happened in Brazil. So it's
yeah,
very interesting. And then you also see what happened in some of the African nations. So if you isolate, you can see some of these ideas, but if you pull back, you're like, oh, wait, that's also happening in different parts of the world. And it's that
mm,
zeitgeist, that spirit, but it's often,
mhm,
but it was actually led by a small number of people. So think about the Bolshevik Revolution. The Bolshevik Revolution, which is Bolshevik, is supposed to mean majority, but it was really the minority, right? There was a voting happening, and the majority of the people who were supposed to vote left. And that's when Lenin came in and they made a vote and they called it afterwards the Bolshevik, the majority revolution. But it was actually a minority. But that was the spirit of the time. And good things came out of it and bad things came out of it. But what you see with all of these periods, and you can track it within the politics, within the art, within the literature, is that these ideas, and those ideas are part of the consciousness of the time. So we can always go
mm,
back. Now, moving forward,
mhm,
certainly, there are a lot of ideas that are circulating, especially within spiritual circles of what's to come
yes,
next. So I'm
yeah,
not going to talk about those because I think everybody else does. So I'm going to go on a slightly different angle, and I'm going to say AI.
yes,
AI,
let's go for AI, yeah,
AI is already transforming how everything is being done.
yes,
Even the streaming service is partially AI, right? But you don't think of it as AI because it's not ChatGPT. So some of the things that we're going to see happening, and some people are actually starting to talk about this, is consciousness. how do we bring consciousness and ethics into AI, and how is AI actually going to affect the development of us as a humanity? Now, there's people with a lot of doomsday type of prophecies, and there's people who are saying, no, 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 no. Actually, look at the big picture, because AI is here. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're looking
Yep.
at from a very doomsday perspective, then that's your consciousness. Now, we need to have ethics. I think that the European Union has been moving towards passing laws so that the use of AI is ethical. If I'm not mistaken, Priti, you're in Europe, so I think you might know more about some of those laws than I do here in the States. But I do know that the union has been pressing forward with certain regulations for the ethical use of AI, and that's the big conversation right now, is the ethical use of AI. But you know, like, so many people are scared of it, and what I'm going to say is it's all going to come down to a matter of your consciousness, because I will give you something positive about AI. So I don't want to get into politics, but I remember when our current president was inaugurated here in the States, he brought in the CEOs of different AI companies, and they gave a brief press conference on how they were planning to interface different types of AIs to help within healthcare. So sometimes, like, let's say, for example, you have a particular medical history, and I don't know, you know, you might be in Brisbane, and you know, all of your medical history is in Brisbane, but you know, you need to go to Sydney. But like, how do you interface that? So we're using AI modules and agents so that hospitals can interface better. So if there's a critical patient, and you need to understand what they're allergic to. Someone's coming in, you know, in an ambulance, and you don't have their whole history. But if you can have some interfacing, if it's used ethically, right? Ethics is the key word here. Well, then lives can be saved. You can save it. So, for example, I have type 1 diabetes, so I use insulin. So for me, it's important that, God forbid, I don't know, I'm in an accident, I'm unconscious, you know, somebody knows how to, you know, the right amount of insulin, or that I even need insulin, and so forth. So there's a potential for a lot of good. There's also, when we're using, you know, technology and an eye for water. Water right now is becoming a scarce resource in many countries, and you need to desalinate, you need to do many things. So there's a lot of possibility for good, but there's also a lot of possibility for negativity, for bad, for darkness, if you use AI irresponsibly, if you use it without consciousness. And right now, we're at that critical phase where we're trying to figure out, how do we move forward responsibly? Now, is there people using it irresponsibly? Oh, yes, there are. But there's also people, and there's think tanks being developed around this, of how do we use this ethically? So I think that's the challenge where we're at. And I think maybe in 20, 30 years, I think it'll be even faster than we think. We're going to be able to look back and say, oh, these were the mistakes we made, very bad. Oh, but this was the good things. So I do think that, without a question, that's going to transform us. But then how do we use it consciously, you know? And I know there's a lot of controversy at the moment with Deepak Chopra, but he did write that book, I forgot the name of it, on AI and consciousness.
Now. Oh, no.
So there is potential here, but it's going to come down to our own consciousness and how we approach it individually. And I know that's a little bit different than some of the things that are circulating, but I think that sometimes we project our own fears versus stepping back and saying, hey, where's this coming from?
Okay.
Where is this coming from? So I think that that's something for us to consider. I mean, I'm not an AI expert. I don't have all the answers, but if we do our research and we commit to an ethical use of, there's a lot of possibility for good. And also how we
Mm.
can even think about how you can unlock your DNA, dormant DNA that's supposed to like revolutionize the way our bodies work, the way our consciousness works, the way we meditate. So there's a lot of possibilities, but again, it's going to boil down to consciousness and how we choose, keyword
Sure.
choose, to use
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
and whether we're going to be scared or we're going to say, no, we're not, I'm not going to be scared, but I am going to definitely push for laws. I'm going to definitely push for integrity. And I think that's something important to consider. I hope that
That's
answered the
wonderful.
question.
It does, it does. And I'm also thinking about Jeff is particularly good recently at putting things to AI and coming up with jingles and making poetry sound wonderful and then coordinating it with the pictures. So it's been beautifully adapted, certainly with the new jingle that we've got for Dreaming the New Dream. And that's something that I wouldn't be able to do. But I've also noticed that I've tended to lean towards AI and different chat GTP and Lumo to ask, what's the best way to reply to this email where they're being a bit bolshy and you want to bring in harmony and you don't want to use words in that way. So I've seen a good side to it, but I've noticed also in all of your readings throughout the book, there is the light and the dark that are there all the times. And what one might consider ethical these days, in 10 years from now, could be, oh, why did we ever go down that road? So ethical, integrity, authenticity, they're all some form of judgment one way or the other.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
mm,
And I think this is where discernment matters, because
yeah,
there is a difference between discernment and judgment, right?
sure.
And we're all going to make mistakes. I don't think we're going to get it perfect. So think
Uh-uh.
about, for example, the environment. We thought we were doing things okay, and look at how much we've damaged it. And now we're like, maybe that wasn't the smartest idea. So there are growing pains, and I do think we will have growing pains. But growing pains are that, growing pains. They're not a judgment. They're not a final destination. It's no different than a child. A child is going to fall. A child is going to make mistakes. We've all made mistakes. We've all been immature. We all haven't always made the best decisions. That's the growing pains of us evolving. So there will be some of that. I think it would be a bit presumptuous of us to think we're going to get it right. But it's here. So how do we mitigate it? How do we work with it? How do we move forward? And it's a daily choice. And
Mhm.
like most things in life, we do the best that we can with what we have at the moment if we're having discernment and if we're being led by the soul.
Okay,
It doesn't mean we're going to get it all right, but
sure.
if what the intention is right, then that means that when we get it wrong and our consciousness is right, we can course correct. We can say, no, that was wrong. Let's do it this way better.
All right, all right. So, in looking at where we are now, you talked about, back in the AI. What is AI? What are the zeitgeists for 100 or 50 years from now?
You know,
Where's the dream going?
for me, the dream is that we actually use all of the information, because AI is a big bank of information,
It is, isn't it? It's huge.
to preserve knowledge so that knowledge isn't lost, but also within this bank we have the capacity to advance science and technology where we can eradicate some diseases. Now, we do know some diseases come from the soul, obviously, but there's also diseases that come, from, for example, germs or what have you not. We can improve medicine in an ethical way. We can make the planet greener. We can do things that actually are supportive of the planet and people, where we have the resources, where we can actually eradicate poverty. Now, that sounds a bit big, but why not? Why not eradicate poverty? Why not have people living a decent life? Why not everybody have access to food and the distribution of food? Because it's not always just the food, but it's the distribution, it's the
Sure.
access. So why not be able to use this database to help us create solutions for just some basic problems like food, water,
Food, water, yeah.
the planet? I mean, just whatever your beliefs are on COVID, we did see, for example, in Venice, the water get cleaner because people weren't out there polluting it, right?
Yeah.
So we have the capacity to reverse some of the damage that we've made to our planet, to Gaia. We have the capacity to unlock parts of our DNA. We have the capacity to further research that can positively impact people's lives. So if we're talking about a dream of how we can use technology, and AI is part of the technology, that's part of it. We know if we can create food that's free of GMOs and harsh chemicals that are actually supportive of our bodies, because disease, it is from the soul, but sometimes it's also from the chemicals. Like, it can cause a chemical imbalance within us. Think about all of the pesticides in our food and how harmful that is to our body, and how hard our body has to work to detox, to be healthy, when it's constantly being bombarded with things that are bad for you. And one of the most basic things that can help contribute to our wellness is food. Let me put it to you this way. There was a study done on at a juvenile facility here in the States, and I forgot where it was at. But what they did was they changed the foods of these juveniles, and they started giving them fresh whole foods versus some of the processed foods that sometimes gets given to people in facilities. And a lot of the aggression and anger was diminished. They actually saw behavioral changes in people. And when we think about, for example, like autism, or for example, now Alzheimer's, we do know that food does impact those diseases. We've seen the science. The science is there. So why not use this technology to create systems where our food supply is not only there, but it is healthy and can be distributed and people have access? Because that's another problem. Not everybody has access, and a lot of food gets wasted, that never gets eaten, that doesn't get seen, that doesn't get consumed by the people who need it. Malnutrition is a big problem in many parts of the world, And imagine if we could actually put AI and technology to use to solve those types of problems. Isn't that incredible? I think
It
for
is.
me, it's an amazing dream.
But there would be a multitude of answers then, because there's just there's a multitude of ways of looking at the problem in order to come up with the solution. So it's not just going to be one. And then there'll be debate upon debate as to which is the solution to opt for.
But if we're going to dream, let's dream big.
Yeah, exactly. I'm just going to throw something in there. Yesterday,
Yeah.
in our North American show, we had Australian astrologer, and we had the transits of United States, UK, and Australia. America was really interesting in its transits. It was Pluto and Jupiter coming together,
Yes.
and it was bringing out new ways of communication and travel. They were the two big things that was coming up. And for America, it was about humanitarianism, peace, and it was based in Cancer, and it was all about coming back to itself. So it was going to come back to family, as in America itself. So it was releasing all the other conduits that have been going out into all these different other NGOs or United Nations. Cut, coming back to the family of America and rebuilding America for its renaissance. It was pretty awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
But many of us are doing that individually and in a national context. I mean, Britain has removed itself from Europe so that it's coming back to be England, Northern Ireland, Wales. So there's a lot of that permeating throughout the world, that we are all cutting off to individualize ourselves in order to be giving the collective. So I'm in relation with the two of you at the moment, but I'm also just being me. So when I'm being me is the best way I can be with both of you.
True. I mean, the thing is that it's about evolvement, and evolving was as an individual, but as a nation. But we were assigning our rights to people who we hadn't given agreement to, or a tacit agreement.
Yeah.
So those unelected individuals were playing with our own sovereignty.
Yeah. And I think that is the largest place of awareness and consciousness for us right now, because we all do doom scrolling, for example, right? We disassociate, but when we're coming back to the individual, you don't have a choice but to be with the individual or to be with the family. And I think there's a tension, right? Much like the book doesn't really have a lot of tension, but I do talk about the light and the shadow as you said it. But there is a tension of the individual versus the collective, the coming inward versus how do we interact with one another globally. I know that Priti, you mentioned, the UK did leave the European Union. I remember that was quite interesting to watch in the news, the different outlooks. But even here in the States, we're a very big country, so we have a lot of regions that have their own cultural nuances, and there's some parts of America that's very conservative, what we call red states, and then we have the more liberal, what we call the blue states, and then, for example, Texas can secede from the nation whenever they want because it's within their state constitution. And there's been talk of that. And there's been talk of, for example, California, Oregon, and Washington becoming its own type of confederacy, where we're like, well, these states are different than those states, and we don't necessarily relate. And then, there's a push and pull where people are like, no, we're part of this larger country. And then there's people who are saying, no, we need to be independent because the rest of the country is X, Y, Z. And just like what you're talking about in the UK, we do have some of that in the States, and there are also these very regional places that have their own distinct identity. And on the one hand, it shows that push, that move to come inward, like you were saying, Jeff. On the other hand, there's also this tension of like, how are we part of this larger whole? And I think that that's something that in one way or another, not only is it in the charts as you mentioned, Jeff, but I think also
Mm.
something that humanity in one way or another is having, I don't want to say confrontation, but it's having its day in court with itself. Like, where do we belong? How are we part of this larger humanity? But then how am I me, individually me? But then how am I part of my family? How am I part of the community? And we live right now in a time that's fascinating where we're in 3 different countries, we're in 3 different continents, and we're
Yep.
interacting, but then we're all individual people. So how do we make all of that happen? And I think that that's what we're traversing right now. And it's
Mm.
interesting because I think it's also part of our evolution and how we can consciously hold the energies, or at least are learning to hold the energies, the space for being the individual, being the family, being the region, but also being part of this larger whole. Because just think about this radio station. It's reaching
Yes.
different continents, different countries. It's individually connecting people with this larger whole, but somehow touching everybody individually, because that's our intention. So
Mm.
it's really quite fascinating. And 100 years ago, this would have seemed incredible. So on the one hand, it's a challenge, but on the other hand, what an amazing challenge to have.
Mm.
True. I mean, in communication, I think that was really, really interesting how it came up in the charts, because
Yeah.
your president, he came out and says it's fake news. And, there's people in the past, like 20, 30 years ago, would say, oh, the media's lied. And they had no repercussions to go back and get a remedy against them because of the sheer cost of going to court for defamation.
Yeah.
So we've seen constantly in America this whole regime of confrontation and paint a picture that's completely oblique, and it's complete. The narrative is completely false, and then all of a
Yes.
sudden you've had this World Cup, and the World Cup's been awesome because the things that have come through
Oh,
on social
wow.
media, this new form of communication, and people are coming in and explaining, oh my God, I never thought these Americans, they're very hospitable, they're very gracious, and their whole demure, the warm and friendly, nothing what the media's painted America. It was a complete makeover, complete change. So many people around the world realize that the people of America are really lovely people, contrary to what we're seeing coming through on mainstream news, And
Yeah, and I think, there's there's a challenge I think that we're facing in America, but I think it's also something that I see it as a pattern in the world where there's this, in a way, disgust or disassociation with the infighting that we see happening politically. So people aren't voting. So,
Mhm.
you know, when we think about, I mean, I don't know specifically how it is in the UK or Australia, but not everybody votes in America. So we have a large constituency of people who really do not vote. And those are usually the swing voters. And it's usually swing voters who often dictate elections, but even they are no longer voting. So it becomes of which side has more people voting, but it's actually a minority. So a lot of people are very disassociated and want nothing to do with that, don't even pay attention. So then when you come
Mhm.
to America and you say, well, people are lovely, some of those people are like, just really don't, some of the people are very politically engaged and some people are just don't want to have anything to do with it. So I've seen other countries where also people aren't voting at the numbers that they can be. So then what ends up happening is that, yes, you have elections, but sometimes those elections do not always reflect a populace.
Mm.
And I think it's tricky because there's this, I mean, even myself, when it was time to vote, I remember being at the ballot and just looking at the ballot and seeing, oh my God, these are my choices. What do I do? You know, I remember being there and literally feeling so disaffected and so disappointed at my options.
Okay. Yeah.
And
They're all characters out of Disneyland, isn't it? Disney World.
and I know I'm not the only person who felt that way.
Mm.
And so I think what ends up happening is there's people who get very passionate and are addicted to the drama. 'Cause drama's addictive.
Yeah.
They're addicted
Yeah.
to it. So that's what you
Mm.
see in the news. And then there's people who say, you know what, I don't want to have anything to do with it. So, like, for example, I went to, I was in England 2 years ago, and I just thought the people were absolutely lovely, because you hear about, like, I've heard stories about London being dangerous and gangs and all of these things. And I felt perfectly fine and safe when I was in London, you know. And then but I did spend most of the time in the country. I had traveled to, I went to Glastonbury, and
Who
then
doesn't go to Glastonbury?
everybody goes, and then, you know, I went to the Cotswolds. I went to, some of the smaller country towns, which I thought were lovely, and the people were so nice, and I had the best of time. And so, the thing is that travel really opens us up to the fact that we're all people, we're all humans, we're all those luminous souls, right? That going full circle. We're all luminous souls just trying to get by. And we all have
Okay.
different tools. And maybe some of us have read a book that another person has. Maybe some of us have had access to ideas that another person hasn't. But at the end of the day, we're all human. And most people, I think, are more good and decent than bad. But the media does create fear mongering. And so we get these ideas. And and I want to briefly say this, is that the way our brains are sometimes wired is to think in binaries. So we
Oh,
have
yes.
this predisposition for binaries, right? So for good, bad, man, woman, dog, cat, up, down. So, and we always like to have a common villain, right? Because then that makes us good. And so what ends up happening is that that's the way sometimes we view people, from other countries, from other nations. And Priti, you and I slightly talked about how sometimes we have these misconceptions and then we verbalize them and we're like, oh my God, well, that sounded horrible. Did I say that? Did I think that? So we do approach the world through binaries. And I think also the next part of our evolution is to move past binary thinking, because it's that binary thinking that keeps our spirit, our consciousness small versus expanded, versus in unity consciousness, versus in allness and one. But if you're within that state of binary, it's hard. So then, like you said, Jeff, the World Cup just exposed that people are people, and people were connecting. I mean, I've seen the videos and I was like, oh, wow. I kept on seeing videos from fans that came from all over the world, and they just seemed amazing. Like they were having the time of their life, and they're like, yeah, the hospitality is great. We're enjoying the food.
Yeah. Well, I think what was really amazing was the guy in England called John Cleese, and he was really well known
yes.
for making a statement. And I saw the parody of what he stated in the World Cup when America has its sports and they call them World Series, but they never send out invitations to the rest of the world to come. And now the world all turned up to a game of soccer/football, and they filled out their stadiums, and the Scots drank bloody Boston Dry.
That was funny. I thought that was the funniest thing ever.
And they carried on drinking until 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and the governor said, yeah, no worries, open up the pubs and all that stuff. And then the English turned up and they shut them down at 10 o'clock. I thought it was really great. But there's the humour, the Dutch, and they've got a double-decker bus, and they're doing their
Oh
dance
yeah.
to the left, and then they go to the right, and there's all of them dressed in orange, Then you got the Norwegian doing the row.
Yeah, isn't that fabulous? And everybody was there for it. Everybody was there for it.
I mean, if you were American and you think, what's this? What's going on here? I mean, you just got swept up in it, didn't it? It was just euphoric.
Oh yeah. Listen, I told my partner, I told him, I'm like, listen, the World Cup is on for the next month and a half. I'm checked out. I'm gonna be doom scrolling. So he's not that much into football. So I would, just have my headphones on and I'm like looking at highlights or looking at the videos, and I was just be laughing so hard. There was so much joy in that.
Yeah, of course.
So much joy. And that's beautiful, because something as simple as a sport, yeah, it's competitive. People can take it a bit far, but there's also so much joy.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
know?
the singing was just phenomenal. I mean, when the Scots turned up in Boston and went to Fenway Park, the home of
Yeah.
Boston Red Sox, the Texas Rangers were playing Boston Red Sox, and the players had never come across that type of atmosphere. It was awesome.
Yeah.
My son was there.
Oh, your son was there?
Yeah, he was
Oh.
there. Yeah, you saw that. And he's back here in England now, waiting. He got a little World Cup, and he kissed it and said, "It's coming home." But the coming
Oh.
home is because that's quite a famous British song, that the idea that we're going to bring the cup back to us. Well, we might bring the consolation prize back now, but it's been engaging, and it has focused everyone's attention, and they've all connected one way or another, which is super. I've got a little WhatsApp group with the family, and so even if I wasn't watching the match yesterday or the last time, there's always ping, 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 ping. No, goal. So even there's a connection.
Yeah, and you know what I loved about it is, we often get so caught up in our own inner world, in doing the work to heal, to grow, to do what have you not. And I know I can get quite caught up when I go into my meditations. Might be in a meditative state for an hour and I'm completely blissed out, and I think, oh, I got to go back to the real world. And I know some of us sometimes get caught up in that, but I think what the World Cup is teaching us is that joy, that is what it is to be human.
Yes.
Not always focusing on the ouch, on the hurt. I need to heal. And we all do, because we're always, letting go, we're growing, we're resetting, right? Like things I talk about in the book. But some of the most powerful moments of our spirituality, of our humanity, is when we come together in joy, because then that creates this energy, this movement, this spirit that just brings a smile. And when you're smiling, you're lit up. Think about it. When you're smiling from joy, that's your soul lit up. And that's one of the things we're here to experience, is to light up, to be luminous. And the World Cup, a sport, is bringing humanity together through the consciousness of joy. And that's one of the most elevated things we could do as humans, right? It's not necessary. It is. Think about it. Joy. And you know that there was a study done. Oh God, when was it? Okay, I forgot the year. Maybe it was around 2009 or so, where they measured the vibration of love and joy vibrated higher than love.
Ooh, nice. Very, very nice.
Yeah.
I like it a lot. And I just wanted to throw in something, but my name, Priti, It actually means the personification of joy. So if I can muster that, and that everyone can bring a little bit of joy into their lives and see beyond all the differences, all the politics, and just have an open heart and embrace someone, enjoy what you're doing. And I think that's marvelous. Yes. So I'm Pretty's all up for it, really.
Oh, I love it. I love it. That's awesome.
Hey,
Very, very
have the unified field of having 64,000 people in a stadium, or
Mm.
on the row. I mean, there's 90,000 turned up outside the Norwegian palace there yesterday to welcome them. Where was I going with this? We had a guy 6 years ago. His name is Bam Bam. He's Indonesian guy, engineer by trade, and him and a group organised a sit-down meditation in Jakarta. I think it was close. Yeah, I might be wrong. There might be 1 million or 2 million people turned up, and they went into a big, huge spiritual meditation, and they really created this energy field. And the reason they did that was to they had an issue with the president Suharto, who'd been entrenched there, a bit like Marcos, and things could get right out of hand because people who have been in power, it makes it very awkward to leave a sense of power. But the overwhelming peace that came into that big unified energy field around Jakarta made it that much more easier for that guy and his family to vacate the presidential palace and allow the JYK, whatever his name is, he had such a big hyphenated long name, they just abbreviated to the first letter of his three names. So there was the power of what an energy can do in terms of transforming a nation.
Yeah.
I mean, quite often you see those big, huge, charismatic churches that you got in America there, and you've got a conductor, and you might have 10,000 people in that auditorium, and they're reading from a book, and that guy's conducting that energy, and it's no different to the folk in Persia doing the same. So it's an interesting battle of spiritual warfare taking place.
Yeah, and you know what's something interesting? Just a little bit of science is, we all have these things called mirror neurons. And what that does is that we mirror one another. So often if you're walking down the street and someone smiles at you and all of a sudden you automatically smile back, or maybe you might be one of those people that look off to the side and say, don't look at me. But the majority of the people, if somebody smiles at them, this genuine smile, you're going to smile back. It's a mirroring. And it's actually part of how our neurons, this is actually part of how we're wired, how our bodies are wired. And our energy also reflects that. So when you're creating these big stadiums, right? And people are joyous and they're laughing and they're just having a good time. They're all mirroring one another. And then you're creating this big unified field. And it can actually be measured. And it's so amazing to consider how we can actually impact one another through something as simple as joy. And it's not just in that moment, but you're transmitting it also all over the planet. And as you leave and the next person that you meet, I mean, look at it. We're talking about it. We've seen the video and we're talking about it right now. That's how far that energetic field, and it's like the butterfly effect. This is, and it's really interesting because, there's a lot of correlation between, string theory, and different parts of sciences, and we're learning about consciousness and spirituality and how they're intersecting more and more. And I think it's quite fascinating when we look at it from this like multi-dimensional perspective, and we can be in awe of the power that we have both individually but also in community when we come together with that intentionality of fun and joy, because it changes things. It changes things, and our spirit wants to be joyous. It wants to shine.
And so if you go like mainstream media, it's like the mirror is being reflected back on them for all their fake components that they've done in order to get eyeballs or ears watching or listening to their industry. It's got to the point that people have realized are being exposed through other platforms and social media, and we're seeing them actually dying on the vine. So we're actually seeing a whole new birth coming forth, whereas that people love watching a fire engine going down to a fire, so they all go down there to catch a house on fire, and so they always looked at that particular component of life and reflected on that. You never really saw any good news, and then they decided, we'll end the show, 6 o'clock news or whatever, at the end with a love story or some beautiful story at the end. In the meantime, it's just the narrative has been pushing a contradiction in life. And the thing is that if you're watching it, so they've transmitting it, you're the receiver, but what they're looking at is making you become a transceiver. So you receive it, then you become a transceiver in the sense that you're now going to transmit it to all your friends or associates, make sure that you've got your tribe. And so now you're in the tribe, and anybody who sways from that tribe, oh, hello, what's going on here? And they try to pull your member of your tribe back into our way of thinking and our concept and all that stuff. And then slowly but surely, the social media with TikTok or X or Facebook or whatever, people are realizing, hang on a sec, and they're starting to question it and thinking about it. It's really impacting on our society globally, isn't it? And we're watching how in Europe, for example, where they're quite clandestine in their approach to trying to batten down the hatches and keep their member states subjugated to their rules from Brussels.
I found it interesting that you used the word spiritual warfare. Can you imagine going to war with a smile on your face? And if that is spiritual war, the war that's being waged at the moment, then open hearts and smiling and embracing and enjoyment, if they are the weapons that we've got to use, then we could have quite a bit of fun with all of this, really.
Yes. I have a girlfriend, and she is the person you have fun with. And I'm saying this because I was talking to her one day, and she says, I think my whole purpose in life is to help people have fun. And it was so funny because I've never heard anybody say that, but she said it with such clarity, with such decisiveness, with such confidence, because it was true. And when you're around her, all you do is laugh and have fun. And she's great at throwing parties. She's great at bringing people together. And it's funny because that is really her gift. Sometimes we think our gift is this grandiose thing, and sometimes it is. Sometimes we have a grandiose mission to be famous, and sometimes it's something else. And my girlfriend, she really has the gift of fun. Like, you cannot stop laughing. Let's say every other word, it's like a big burst of laughter. And she spreads that everywhere. And I look at her and I'm like, wow, whenever I'm around her, I feel elevated because I'm having fun. And then my spirit feels replenished. So she's transmitting codes of happiness and joy. And that is a mission that maybe doesn't sound as grandiose as inventing a telescope, but I think it's actually more powerful because it's doing something for people at a profound level. And there's something quite impactful about having joy in our life, especially when we've been beaten down, when we've fallen, when we have forgotten. And I think that is one of the most expansive spiritual things you could do in your life, is to lead your life with joy.
Yeah. I wondered, Jeff, how were you enjoying yourself the other day when you went into the aviaries? And
Oh, that was
to me, there's Hmm?
that was in February this year.
February, was it? Yeah. But there's a great beauty in not only us as humans getting together, but connecting with the rest of life. There's enormous diversity of life. Like with a bit of luck, you'll be swimming with the whales and the sharks and the dolphins. And there's a peace that comes with that. And my favorite thing to do is just listen to the birds in the morning. And you hear them tweeting away, and I have no idea what they're saying. I don't know what they think of me or what. It doesn't matter, but they're just doing it. They're just being who they are. They're just being a bird and having a good tweet in the morning, and I love it. So there's a greatness, I think, in just admiring a rose for being a rose, or a lily, or just where did it come from, and how did it get there? And when you walk down the road and there's weeds and pavement along the cracks in the pavements, that life is such a bountiful and magnificent force that you can just immerse yourself in it and be part of it.
Gotcha.
So I quite enjoy that.
Going to change the subject somewhat. Now, you
Yes.
girls, you mentioned that you girls came together through your Akashic Records groups.
We did, yes.
One's in the UK, one's in America. Tell us about how that come to be. How did that come about?
Oh, it was through a guy, Adrian, and he was putting out Akashic Records training, and I maybe it was a couple of years ago I started doing that. And he, yes, used technology like we're doing now, and did some Akashic Records training together in a big group. And then afterwards, subsequently, came the WhatsApp group. And neither Cindy or I know if we were both on the original training, but we think we were, because we've had that connection for quite some time. So probably it was.
Yeah.
And then people joined in, and the group itself was very, very supportive. Well, certainly was for me quite some time back, when my ex-husband fell off a ladder and broke 9 ribs and had bruising on the brain. And the only reason my eldest son phoned me was to find out about legal aspects of things. And he only phoned me because I believed he thought he was on the verge, the cusp of life and death, whether he'd live or he'd not live. And he was in a coma for 6 weeks. And at that point, the Akashic Records group just stepped in with completely unconditional love, unwavering support, and sustained me while I was helping and sustaining my son and his father and their wider family. Something that was quite unexpected to me. So that's our connection. That's how the group itself has come to support me. And I'm sure you've got your stories too, Cindy.
Well, yes. So I decided to take the course for no other reason than I thought it was going to be fun. So it's kind of how how I sometimes decide things. So I've been doing energy work and have multiple certifications from, I've been doing this for many, many years. And every time I decide to learn a modality, I don't go in with the intention of having a business around the modality. I just do it because I think it'll be fun and I might meet interesting people. So every time I've taken some type of course on something, I've met incredible people and it's become very expansive. So, like, for example, about 15 years ago, I decided to become a Reiki master again because I thought it would be fun. And I met incredible people. And I don't necessarily advertise the services because it's not necessarily a business that I do. I do it mostly for myself and to share energy with family, with friends, with the planet, and so when Adrian's course came up, I was not quite sure if I was going to do it, but I said, "Well, that sounds like fun. Why not?" And so I've stayed in the WhatsApp group. I'm not always as active as others, but I generally pop in and check in. And Priti is a name that I've seen come up over the last, I think, 2 years. And I shared my book also with the group. Priti was very supportive. She bought the book and then she reached out and invited me to be here with you today. So it's quite incredible, and it's a lovely group, the Akashic groups, because it's basically people who have trained as practitioners or as master teachers to go into the Akashic and clear the Akashic. So it's a very lovely and healing group for people who are interested in that subject matter, in that material. So I'm a part of the group, and sometimes I'm there for the fun, and sometimes I'm there for the support, and sometimes I've also been supported. So it's quite incredible and amazing.
So the bottom line is that when you turn up into the Akashic records, are you looking at the soul's growth, and are you looking at the reincarnation of a soul to find out what it's come to see, what it's come to learn?
So I think maybe Priti and I might answer it a little bit different. I'm not sure. I don't want to speak for you, Priti. So I think it might depend on the individual. So this course is, the group is to teach you how to clear people's records. If there's something that they wish to focus on and clear, or something they want to rewrite, there's usually healing that can come through it. Now, you can tweak it and do different things for it. So if you're a channel, if you're a medium, if you have other gifts, then you're able to do more than just clearing. So I don't always talk about that this is something I can do, but I am able to, if it's for the highest and greatest good, is see into people's bodies and see into lives or and other things, if that's something that the soul has agreed and is okay with me seeing, and I'm able to do certain things that maybe another person doesn't, but then another person might do other things and take that specific training and tweak it to whatever their gifts are. At least that's how I approach it when I do it for myself, or for a friend, or for someone who has asked. I'm not 100% sure how Priti approaches it, but I think there's kind of like a baseline, and then people tend to tweak it in different ways. I don't know if that's the way I would explain it for myself, but Priti, how would you explain it for you?
Well, the Akashic records I was intrigued with, and I went about it in a kind of engineering, methodical way, and see what. And I found all of it a way in which you can get more language and more connections with other people because you have a particular way of approaching it. And I found over the years, no matter what I've come across, it's broadened my perspectives, broadened my horizons, and I can connect more easily with people, regardless of what their background is, where they come from, their cultural differences. And I found it fascinating when you and I spoke all about the different cultural differences, that's just another way to disassociate, another way to disconnect. So it really is all about connection, connection, connection. And I totally love doing this, co-hosting with Jeff, because he's in the Southern Hemisphere and I'm in the Northern Hemisphere, and I'm on the East-West line, and it's all good news. And it's not gossip, it's just people connecting and people recognizing that we've got our own characteristic differences, but when you move beyond that, even you and I spoke about Rumi, 800-year-old jokes that are still funny. And I just love the connection with Rumi when he talks about beyond the differences of right doing and wrong doing, there is a field and I'll meet you there. And that's the field I love playing in. I just love it. And that's why I started doing the Akashic Records and why I joined the group and carried on joining the group. And like you, I've been supported by the group. I've gained knowledge from the group, and I have supported the group as well. So it's all good stuff for me.
So I've got one more question for you before we finish up. Cindy, what did you want to do when you grew up? Or do you
Okay, so I'm not doing what I wanted to do when I grew up. So when I was a child, I thought I was going to be an astronaut. I wanted to be an astronaut. I wanted to go into space. And, you know, I grew up in the 80s. And then the Challenger happened. And my dream and then I said, I don't know if I have the best dream. So I had to rethink that dream but when I was when I was pre-Challenger accident, I used to dream of being an astronaut, and I think that's because I was always really interested in space, in thinking about extraterrestrial life, not from a place of fear, but like what is out there, and ideas, and how much fun it would be to travel. And I do enjoy traveling now. So that was my big dream as a child. And then when I saw the tragedy, something in me kind of contracted, and I had to loosen it up. And then after that, I decided I wanted to be a lawyer, but then I realized I wasn't very good at arguing, and I don't really necessarily enjoy the glee, because you have to have a certain, it's not about conflict or confrontation, because we all need to deal with conflict, but there's a certain glee that I think sometimes comes with, like, sometimes being a trial lawyer. And that was a dream for a minute. I realized, no, I don't think that's quite me. So I was a little slow in figuring out what the dream was. And then I realized that my dream was what I was always told as a child I should do, and I used to fight against, which was to teach. So when I was a little girl, everybody would tell me, Cindy, you'd be a great teacher. You should be a teacher. And, you know, I'm an Aquarian. So by default, even though I have a very mellow personality, I don't like to be boxed. So because everybody would tell me I should be a teacher, I said, no, I will never be a teacher. And then, and then after I got through my different dreams and figured it out, I got a Ph.D. and guess what I was?
A teacher.
A teacher. You know, I was a professor, but what do professors do? You teach. So you're professor's just, in my opinion, a fancy word for just being a teacher. So I was a teacher. I was a professor. I taught for several years. And then later on, I I used to direct the Cultural Arts Center, but through the different events, exhibits, you're teaching something about history. So I realized what I always wanted to do was to teach, but I used to run away from my own dream just because I was rebelling. And at heart, I'm a teacher, and I didn't always see it as a dream, but I realized that was my dream. I just was in denial for a long time, and and I think that's honest. Sometimes, that's part of us getting to know each other. But being an astronaut was real. That really was my original first dream, and maybe in the next lifetime.
No, I'm going to say to you that you're actually doing it, and the fact is, it's the symbology of the astronaut, but in the symbology is the fact that when you go into meditation and you step out of your body and you start traveling, you got outside the box, you're into the freedom, and you're actually investigating and seeking out. I mean, Akashic Records is a great way of looking at perspectives and finding out what's going on. And you probably dig a bit deeper and find out whether or not that soul came from a different star system or in a galaxy. So,
yeah, that'll be a different conversation, and that one's a really fun one.
That's technically where a woman has gone before. Okay.
Well, in your book, if you don't mind, if we're winding up now, you've got a closing prayer that
yes.
I like very, very much. That if we're going to be finishing up, unless there's something else, so it's right at the end of the book, and it says, "May every day bring renewal. May every breath reconnect you to your essence. May your heart stay open to love in all its forms. May peace walk beside you as a faithful friend. May you always feel connected or connection to your soul and splendor. May your awareness be light that gently guides you back to your spirit. May your courage always guide you back to love and what is true. May the light of your soul reveal the wholeness that has always lived there. May your soul express its beauty, radiance, and joy. And may awe, wonder, and the promise of life's unfolding always live within you. May your truth rise with grace and shine as a beacon for others. May you live so fully, anchored in wholeness and in the presence of being, that your light helps others to remember their own. It is not an ending. It is a homecoming to the soul's eternal remembrance. You are whole, you are light, you are love, infinite and divine." And I loved that. I just loved it.
Thank you. Thank you. I really, oh my God, I'm getting emotional. I really wish that for all of us, because we forget, but we are all worthy and deserving of embracing, receiving, and living that prayer. And that is my wish for all of us.
And I'm very, very happy to mirror it back to you.
Thank you.
Very good. Love you. Love you both. Thank you for coming on. And
Thank you.
And thank you. Thank you for having me. And thank you to the listeners. Thank you, everybody.